on Diversity Commission. Both the panel discussions will be for about 40 minutes. And after both the panel discussions, we'll have the SKOCH Governance Award, where the silver awards will be presented to about 27 organizations for contributing towards inclusive growth, livelihoods, and equity. So a very warm welcome, everyone. And before we proceed to the first panel discussion, may I also share that the entire proceedings of this session is also being telecast on the ILF SKOCH website. That's the ilf.scotch.in. So let's introduce the panelists for the first panel discussion, which is on the topic Uniform Civil Code. Let me begin from my left. We welcome Ms. Kirti Singh, Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Ms. Kirti is a noted lawyer working on women's issues in Delhi. And as a part-time member of the 18th Law Commission of India, she worked on reports on laws related to child marriage and acid attacks. She's also on their expert committee of the National Commission for Women on laws. A very warm welcome and a round of applause for Ms. Kirti Singh. To her left, please welcome Mr. Manish Tiwari, a lawyer, a politician, Member of Parliament from the lower house Lok Sabha, representing Anandpur Sahib from Punjab. He is a senior national spokesperson with the Indian National Congress, and he has served as the Union Minister of State Independent Charge in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India. A very warm welcome, Mr. Manish Tiwari. To Manishji's left is Mr. Wajahat Habibullah, India's first Chief Information Commissioner under the Right to Information Act, former Chairman, National Commission of Minorities, a former civil servant, and author of the book, My Kashmir, The Dying of the Light. Mr. Habibullah, a very warm welcome. To his left is someone who's just received the SKOCH ILF Award for service to law. Please welcome Mr. Joydeep Gupta, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. He has over 3 decades of experience in commercial and constitutional law litigation, comes from a family of lawyers. Joydeep's insights are highly valued, and he is an accredited advocacy trainer. A very warm welcome, Mr. Joydeep Gupta.
Thank you very much for the introductions. If you'll allow me to take over.
Yes, and now it's over to the moderator, Mr. Rohan Kochar.
Although the panel needs no introduction, neither does the topic. Uniform Civil Code is perhaps as old as the Constitution of India itself. And let me start with the only lady on the panel, Ms. Kirti Singh. Madam, you were a member of the 18th Law Commission, which in its report number 211 had said that laws on registration of marriage and divorce must be consolidated. And you'd recommended the registration of Muslim, Christian, Parsi, Jewish, and Baha'i marriages. In fact, you had called in your report the Indian Christian Marriage Act of 1872 to be obsolete. You had said that there is a popular perception and a general confusion in the minds of the people that registration of all marriages will lead to them being registered as a civil union and therefore being governed by the general civil law of the country, and this confusion must end. Do you think personal laws in India have kept pace with modern times, and do you think a uniform civil code today is socially desirable?
Well, let me begin by stating clearly that I think the 21st Law Commission was right when it said that it is neither necessary nor desirable to have a uniform civil code. I will talk about necessary first and desirable second. It is neither necessary because India has a very rich history of reform led by the women's movement in India. Let us be clear. It hasn't been governments, apart from the first perhaps, who have led the reform process, but it has been the women's movement which has fought for reform in dowry law, which has fought for reform in rape laws, it has fought for the Domestic Violence Act, it has fought for the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, it has it has fought for protection of children under Offence Act. It has fought for many other laws. And it's always been a widespread campaign by the women's movement and a lot of negotiating with the present government, with the government of the day, to get these reforms through. So it is not as if we have not had reforms in Indian law. We also have fought for reforms within different personal laws. For instance, the 2005 reforms in the Hindu Succession Act. We have fought for reforms in the Indian Divorce Act and aligned it with other acts. We have fought against triple talaq. And finally, the Supreme Court declared it null and void. So reform within laws and reform via common laws, which affect all women and which are not part of any personal law, is what we have done. So for instance, the protection of children, the prohibition of the Child Marriage Act is a law which applies to everyone. The Domestic Violence Act applies to everyone. And we have consistently asked for reform in these areas, because what the women's movement is interested in is not uniformity per se. It doesn't see any great in uniformity, but inequality and the woman's right to live with dignity. And it has fought along those lines. The 21st Law Commission also made a very sharp distinction when it talked of differences per se not being important, but being important. What is important is discrimination. And it also recommended that slowly the discrimination in each law should be removed. And this is the way forward. So uniformity per se is not equality. Equality is not uniformity. And we mustn't confuse the two. The Indian women's movement has always been for equality, except when it thought that, maybe uniformity will bring equality, but it soon realized that that would be against another very important concept, and that is diversity. We have diverse cultures in our country. We have diverse communities, and they each have diverse laws, personal laws. And we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathtub. We want to keep what is good in all these laws, and we want to eradicate what is not in tune with the constitutional values of equality and dignity. And so I would start with this.
But thank you very much for your opening remarks, Ms. Singh. Mr. Tiwari was in his constituency just this morning, and he took a flight to be a part of this integral discussion. So thank you very much for being here and talk about such a pertinent topic. He's also currently in the Supreme Court on the subject of the Uniform Civil Code. Mr. Tiwari, at the time of the Constituent Assembly, there was strong opposition to the idea of a Uniform Civil Code by certain Muslim leaders, Ismail Saab, Nazruddin Ahmad, who said that if you do this without the say of the respective religious leaders, it might be seen as an infringement on personal laws. Hindu laws were reformed 10 years after India gained independence. Why was the UCC only listed as a directive principle of state policy? And why do you think, in your famous words, it's become a dog whistle today?
Thank you, Rohan, for inviting me to this panel. Let me answer your questions in the reverse, and starting with the dog whistle. There are 18 articles of the Constitution and the Directive Principles of State Policy. Why does only one, Article 44, get picked up repeatedly and has become the favorite whipping boy of certain extremely regressive elements, if I were to use that word. And the reason is very clear. For it serves the agenda of polarization. It serves the agenda of othering the other even further. So therefore, the Uniform Civil Code, unfortunately in the political lexicon, is no longer a legal term. It's a metaphor, it's a shorthand for polarization. Let there be absolutely no confusion about that. Number two, going back to the debates of the Constituent Assembly, I think one thing which is missed and possibly deliberately overlooked is that the framers of the Constitution talked about a uniform civil code and not a common civil code. So the distinction between uniformity and commonality needs to be very clearly understood. And therefore, when the framers of the Constitution talked about a uniform civil code, it was uniformity of principles of equality and egalitarianism across different personal laws. And to your question as to why did the Hindu personal laws get codified first and not some of the latter, let's not forget the fact that when the Constituent Assembly was being was deliberating and the Constitution was being created, in the fundamental rights, you introduced a prohibition that untouchability is banned by law. Now, I often ask myself that in part 3 of the Constitution, why does this prohibition come in? It's not giving anyone a right. It is saying that untouchability and begar are banned by law because the framers of the Constitution were very cognizant of some of the most pernicious practices in, if I can use the word, not begar, but untouchability in the Hindu faith. And so therefore it had to go. And also let's not forget the fact that the codification of Hindu laws did not start in 1955 or 56. It actually started in 1947. It was the reason why Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar resigned from Pandit Nehru's cabinet on 18th of October 1951, saying that Nehru is not doing enough to codify the personal laws. And in fact, a certain codification of the other laws existed. You had the Sharia law of 1937. You had the Christian Marriage Act. You know, you had the Parsi Marriage Act. And so therefore, there were different laws which existed at that point in time which codified other personal laws. Also, there was a kind of a uniform civil code which was brought into existence, a voluntary uniform civil code in terms of the Special Marriages Act, read with the Indian Succession Act. That was a voluntary opt-in uniform civil code if someone didn't want to follow his or her personal laws. So therefore, that is why I say that when the UCC is used in the political discourse, it is nothing more than a dog whistle, unfortunately. Thanks, and I'll end with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Tiwari, for sharing your views. Dr. Habibullah, Mr. Tiwari spoke about this idea of othering the other. And, you know, at the time of the Constituent Assembly, there was a feeling that India is a country of complexities, with varied religions, regions, ethnicities, tribes, languages, customs, and practices. Can those practices truly be made universal? And having headed the Minorities Commission, to your mind, is there a perception that a uniform civil code, if implemented, will discriminate against the customs of minority communities in India?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this discussion today on an issue which is, of course, engaging the country. And I don't know if we really need to go into, Advocate Mrs. Kirti Singh has very ably said that there is no need for a uniform civil code, but I don't think we really need to go into that argument at this stage. Because, as Manish mentioned, the Uniform Civil Code is part of the Constitution already. I don't think we need to reopen that argument. Will it militate against the rights of minorities and all that kind of thing, the question that you're putting to me? I don't think that is our mandate to discuss that at this stage. The Constitution of India, in which all of us have already given our commitment and have been given the commitment since 1950, already mandates a uniform civil code, but as Manish mentions, it is a part of the directive principles. And as part of the directive principles, what Article 44 says is the state shall endeavor to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. Mind you, secure for the citizens, not override the will of citizens. So therefore, what it implies is not that you don't need a uniform civil code, that you need a uniform civil code, but this must be based on a consensus of the citizenry as to what the contents of that uniform civil code is. And then what will be the use of that uniform civil code? It will help the government it will guide the government in mandating laws, in actually framing laws. So what it actually means then is that the Uniform Civil Code is not necessarily something that you mentioned that it becomes a compulsion. But like the Special Marriages Act, it is an option. And if it is so designed as to be an option, I personally see no objection at all in it. In fact, it is very wholesome. It is a very wholesome suggestion. And there was a huge argument about this. This issue has been argued earlier, except that those who militated and argued against the Uniform Civil Code, which was first proposed, were none other than the RSS, who campaigned vigorously against a Uniform Civil Code and argued for adherence to the Dharma Shastras. But does the Uniform Civil Code militate against the Dharma Shastras? As does it militate against Sharia law? It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. And therefore, now I think the argument is a little premature because we don't know what is proposed in the Uniform Civil Code. There's just an idea. And the idea has already been accepted. So what is the argument about? That this clause is wrong or that clause is wrong? No. There is no clause. So the question is, I think it comes down to what Manish has so ably summarized. If it is used as a tool to settle scores between communities, then obviously it is destructive and cannot be supported. If it is only to be implemented in the spirit of the Constitution, and Manish, the Panchayati Raj is also part of the directive principles. It wasn't there earlier. Now it is part of the 73rd and 74th Amendments. Though it still hasn't been dropped from the directive principles, it's still a directive principle, but nevertheless. Therefore, the Uniform Civil Code is something that we want. We need not, therefore, of course, for political reasons, there will be reasons for opposing a statement or otherwise, but otherwise we need not oppose the intention of the Prime Minister announced by him of coming up with the Uniform Civil Code. Very good. Who was the father of the earlier initiative for the Uniform Civil Code? None other than Jawaharlal Nehru, supported by B.R. Ambedkar. But as Manish says, the way that it evolved and then there was no Hindu Code Bill. In 1938, the Indian National Congress set up a committee, a subcommittee, to look into the rights of women. And from that emanated a Hindu Code Bill. The Hindu Code Bill never became a law. It became 4 laws. So therefore, is this talk of having several laws, several uniform laws under the Uniform Civil Code? We don't know. So what are we arguing about? So I will not go into further detail in this matter, but to say that the Uniform Civil Code, if it is to be overriding, will also override all the 4 Hindu personal law acts, Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Succession Act, Hindu Minority Maintenance Act, Maintenanceship Act, and so on, and Hindu Adoption Act. All these will also be overridden. Not only that, as mentioned, there are other communities which have their personal laws. Are those to be overridden? At this stage, I would simply argue that what you want to do with the Uniform Civil Code, go ahead, as long as it is not made a compulsion, because in that way it will override the diversities which you mentioned in the country. It can't be allowed to do that. But at the same time, personal laws require to be revised. And this should not be necessarily a problem. The Shahbano Amendment, what goes by the Shahbano Amendment, was a revision of Muslim personal law. And the personal laws, it is useless because many people argue that this is now against the religion. No. I, being a Muslim, can say so with confidence. The personal laws as exist today in India were laws passed during the colonial period by the British India government.
Sir.
And the reason why they were passed was they wanted to, actually after the war of 1857, wanted to win over the clergy among the Muslims. Therefore, they give undue authority to the clergy under that law. So I will end there and await any questions in the matter. Thank you.
Speaking of compulsions and speaking of this idea of uniform civil code just being around in principle, Mr. Gupta, the Supreme Court has on several occasions expressed strong displeasure that there isn't in place a single set of personal laws in India. And the Shah Bano judgment, which Mr. Habibullah referred to, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud noted his displeasure at the fact that Article 44 has unfortunately remained a dead letter. And he said that there was no evidence of any official activity for framing a common civil code for the country, and he wanted a beginning to be made in that direction. A little earlier, in the Keshav Nanda Bharti case, Chief Justice Sikri had observed that no court can compel the government to lay down a uniform civil code. It's essentially desirable in the interest of the integrity and unity of the country. So clearly there are 2 schools of thought. One says that there is legal diversity in the constitution and not religious diversity. And the other says, well, look, because of the fact that it's listed in the concurrent list, states are allowed to legislate on it, so let that legal diversity prevail. Do you think a uniform civil code can address this conundrum?
Speaking as a professional lawyer, I find it very interesting that the Uniform Civil Code was seen as desirable by the progressive elements of the Constituent Assembly. As you heard, Nehruji himself was in favor of the Uniform Civil Code. Of course, we still do not know in what form he had envisaged it, because it was never spelt out. And it was opposed by the religious conservatives, if I may call them that, from various religions. We have come a full circle where the religious conservatives, or at least a section of them, are in favor of the Uniform Civil Code, and the progressive elements in our constitutional framework are opposed to it. So obviously, this shows that there has been a historical evolution of the society, which has resulted in this somewhat reversal of the poles, so to speak. Now, the first thing that will uh, occur to anybody, and this is precisely the bewilderment that I think I heard in Mr. Habibullah's point of view, is what are you talking about? Tell us what are you talking about, then we'll start discussing it. Because when we talk about a uniform civil code, we have no model in our hand. We do not know what it means. What do we have in our hands? We have one common civil code in Goa, which makes a common provision for family-related laws and property-related laws. That's an example. Do we want that kind of a common code for India as a whole? That's one question. The second model that we have is what we loosely call the Hindu code. Now, the Hindu code, as has been pointed out, ended up in being 4 different statutes. Now, is it that when we have a uniform civil code, it will just be a conglomeration of different statutes, in which case the debate would be completely different. Now, the third thing, so these are the 2 models we have in our mind. We have no other models. Of course, there are foreign models which we might look into. The third thing that has to be noted in this equation is that when we talk about the Hindu code, we talk about making uniform family and property related laws within one religion. Now, if you want to talk about a uniform civil code which spans across religions, then a completely different picture emerges. We do not know in what sense it was actually envisaged when Article 44 was put into the Constitution, except that it was felt that at some stage, several aspects of personal laws in this country should not be different if you are a citizen of India. That's all. But to conclude this part of my response to the question, it is of course true that the Constitution is a social contract. That's the first thing that any lawyer will learn, that it is a social contract. Now, a social contract, even if it provides for democracy, is not majoritarian. You do not say that because we are in the majority, we can have a social contract which suits us but does not suit the minority. We can't say that. The social contract has to go across majority and minority. So even though we have a democratic constitution, it cannot be majoritarian. Therefore, the point remains that if there is opposition from any religious segment that we do not want a common personal law, then I do not see how we can enforce it by overriding their interests completely. We can deal with other aspects as you go along, but this, I think, is the way I look at it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. Ms. Singh, it is nobody's case that social evils which are continuing under the garb of customs should be allowed to prevail. Triple talaq, for instance, was abolished in 2019. Dowry has been abolished under the law. Clearly, there is need for reform. What should this reform look like?
Yes, there is still need for reform in all the personal laws, because in varying degrees, they still discriminate against women and against human beings. For instance, but we have found in our endeavors to reform the law that successive governments have refused to look at the law from the women's point of view. This is one thing that I want to make clear, because we had asked for a law, for instance, to deal with the matter of choice in relationship, with the matter of honor killing, or so-called honor killing. The Supreme Court has opined upon it, the Law Commission had talked about it, and we, earlier than that, since 2005 have been asking for a law on the crimes, not only the killing, but the crimes in the name of honor. However, this has not been done. So it is the, and again, when the present government came in, we asked for this, but this was not done. Again, we have asked for a crime, the rights of women in matrimonial property. These are rights which flow from the time that they get married, whether they are earning or not, or whether they are bought a property in their name or not. So we have asked that women be recognized as equal in the marital home, in tune with Article 16 of CEDAW, and in tune with several other countries which have recognized that what the productive value of a woman's household work is. A recent Madras judgment also recognized it. And surprisingly, I think it's an excellent report, the 21st report of the Law Commission also said there should be this right to marital property. But what is the matter? The matter is that governments don't easily comprise mostly of patriarchal elements or aggressive elements, you can say. They don't easily agree to give women equal rights. And that is why I say we have a rich history of common laws. We finally managed to pass the Domestic Violence Act, finally managed to pass the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act, only by ceaseless campaigning by women's movements and by the women themselves. And yes, no law can be brought about, I agree, that no law can be brought about without widespread consultations within the community which it is seeking change of. So, and without particularly the women of the community, I would say, because ultimately these laws, personal laws, in varying degrees, are very important for women and are, and again I will reiterate that what is, let's not throw out the baby with the bathtub. What is culturally and otherwise not against equality or not against the concept of dignity of a woman should remain. What is in the different laws, we can only do so if we retrain the structure as it is. And yes, we have changed our mind since Article 44 was put in the Constitution. Why? Because we have seen how governments have acted in an extremely patriarchal manner and have not taken into view the women's point of view.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Singh. In the spirit of changing minds, Mr. Tiwari, you recently put out on Twitter a quote by Guruji Golwalkar, which came in The Organizer in the 1970s, and he said, uniformity is a pointer to the downfall of nations, and harmony and uniformity are two very different things. For harmony, uniformity is not necessary. Do you feel that there is a compelling need for the Uniform Civil Code, or can the same means today be achieved through harmonizing existing laws, which everyone seems to be in consensus on?
Well, Mr. Golwalkar gave a rather expansive interview to Mr. K.R. Malkani, who was then the editor of The Organizer, where he was absolutely clear in his articulation that a uniform civil code is not required. So therefore, on the question of changing one's mind, I think a lot of people have changed their minds a lot of times, between 1950 or 1946 and today. And as Winston Churchill had once famously remarked, those who don't change their minds change nothing at all. So there is nothing wrong in changing your mind. But having said that, you see, the more important thing is that, and this is particularly galling that why isn't there enough conviction of courage to intervene legislatively in order to proscribe what are pernicious and clearly patriarchal or discriminatory practices in different personal laws? I mean, why did you have to leave it to the Supreme Court to abolish triple talaq? If triple talaq had to be abolished, why wasn't there any legislative action? Or if there is any other practice which is considered pernicious by the legislature, why doesn't it step in? You know, I completely agree with what Kirtiji said about honor killings. I mean, yesterday there was this full page in the Hindu that in today's day and age, you know, a young girl was strangled to death by her brother, her mother, and the father in the name of ostensibly, quote unquote, honor, which is possibly the most unhonorable thing that I can do. So the limited point being that unfortunately when the push comes to the shove and dubious electoral calculations start being made, both ways, in terms of acting and in terms of not acting, the baby actually gets thrown out with the bathwater. I'll stop with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Tiwari. Mr. Habibullah, even though the government of the day has hinted that tribal communities of the Northeast will be exempt from the potential uniform civil code, some fear that it may set a wrong example if any exemptions are granted. Do you feel the UCC, if it truly is to be uniform, should be allowed to have exemptions? France has no exemptions in their civil code.
Well, Rohan, this brings me back to my initial point. We don't have a draft. So are there any exemptions or are there no exemptions? If there are exemptions, on what grounds are the exemptions? How can I start an argument on an issue which doesn't exist at all? Yes, Advocate Pendra Bakshi has said that this could be a useful suggestion if it encourages dialogues between communities. But if you end up by making it an issue between Hindus and Muslims alone, then you are destroying the very purpose of having a uniform civil code in a progressive and developmental manner, and make it a negative development, as has been discussed by my colleagues on the stage. So the question of whether there should be exemption or not, I think becomes totally notional.
Mr. Gupta, let me, for the sake of argue and assume that there is a uniform civil code tomorrow. Can you rationalize such a uniform civil code with Articles 25 and 26, which prescribes for freedom of religion and prescribes for freedom of managing one's own religious affairs within the community?
First of all, everybody must realize that the fundamental rights chapter will override Article 44. Because Article 44 is there does not mean that any law can be made which will violate any of the provisions of the fundamental rights chapter. That's number one. If it could violate it because it violates Article 14 and creates discrimination. It could violate by creating problems within the practice of religion, as is provided for in Article 25 particularly, or it could also violate Article 29, which allows people to preserve their own culture. So these are three aspects. I don't think that Uniform Civil Code, of course here, as between the rights of men and women, Article 14 is always a very important issue. But if we are talking about personal laws of family and succession and property, etc., etc., perhaps a uniform civil code will not be so much hit by Article 14. Will it be hit by Article 25? Now, this depends upon another great constitutional pushback which is likely or which is being sought currently. What I mean is, Article 25 gives the freedom of religion to Indian citizens. This has been interpreted. This has been interpreted by the Supreme Court of India as early as 1952 in the Shirur Mutt case to say that what Article 25 protects is the essential practices of a particular religion. Not every aspect of a religion is protected by Article 25, only essential practices are protected. It's a narrow view of Article 25, and to my mind, there is a very good reason why the Supreme Court on a legal analysis felt that Article 25 should be interpreted narrowly. Why? Because if you interpret it very expansively, then what happens is you set up conflict with other aspects of the law. That's the reason, I think. Now, the current tendency is to argue against a narrow interpretation of Article 25, not for the purpose of the UCC, but for other purposes. In order to bring in Dharma Shastra, it is sought to be argued now that every aspect of a religion is protected. Even if I am wearing something and my religion suggests that I wear it, then it should be protected. Or if I am supposed to use a particular utensil, then that is also supposed to be protected under Article 25. Now, of course, religion is defined legally for the purpose of our constitution, not merely as philosophy, not merely as religious philosophy, but also religious practices. But even then we say only those philosophical principles and those practices which are essential are protected. If we now expand that definition for other purposes, then UCC is impossible, because UCC then will be hit by Article 25, because then it will be claimed that every aspect of personal law, every aspect of family law, every aspect of property law is actually an essential part of my right to religious freedom. If that is so, then of course there cannot be a UCC. So you see what is happening? The tussle is in two ways, and they are conflicting each other.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Tiwari would like to comment.
I just wanted to add on to what Mr. Gupta had said. You see, the Constitution, in addition to being a social contract, is also a national security instrumentality. See, the periphery of India was managed by the British using treaties. We have tried to manage the periphery of India by using constitutional guarantees. The British were managing an empire, we were building a republic. And therefore, if you look at Article 371A, Kwe Nagaland, you look at 371G, Kwe Mizoram, you look at Article 244A, 6th schedule, paragraph 3, there are explicit guarantees that you have given to the people of those regions that even Parliament does not have the right to interfere with their personal laws. I mean, and those guarantees were not given in an abstract context. They were given in the context of managing very specific national security situations, just as 370 was given in the context of Jammu and Kashmir, which is before the Supreme Court. So therefore, when you are going to transgress or you are going to interfere with the personal laws or with those constitutional guarantees, it no longer remains a question of personal laws, it becomes a national security challenge. And therefore, the government would be very well advised not to go down this route. We've already seen what the slightest apprehension has done in Manipur. You have a state which is up in flames and divided vertically. So therefore, when you run these extremely destructive narratives, they are destructive of the very soul, the essence, and the idea of India.
Ms. Singh, would you like to respond to that?
I think Mr. Tiwari is right, except with the rider. Except with the rider. And the rider should be that as far as somebody else's rights are concerned, for instance, women's rights are concerned, then we have to interfere. We have to interfere. We have to change it, and otherwise we can, if we want to maintain our nation as one whole, if we want to have national integrity, I think having different laws, different culture, diversity in our country is preferable to dividing it on basis of a majoritarian, perhaps, civil code. Because let's be clear that if a civil code comes in, then the manner in which it is being articulated is that such and such Muslim law does such and such. But it isn't being seen that the Hindu laws which exist, for instance, deny women right in land, agricultural land in several states, including UP and Uttarakhand. That is not being seen. None of the Hindu laws are being changed. A law which states that when a woman dies interstate, in the absence of her husband and children, the property will go to her in-laws, not to her whole family with whom she might be living. So it goes to her father-in-law instead of her own father or mother. So it's having this kind of vision stops us from seeing what is wrong all around. And I think in any case, to tolerate diversity is a very important concept in our times. And I'm very sad today because we have seen the extent to which intolerance and hatred has reached, because one teacher in a particular state asked children of that school to slap a boy who belonged to a minority only because he belonged to a minority. And she has made it her mission to do so in every classroom that she attends. And this is, of course, an extreme. But it is an extreme that we can reach if we do
Madam,
not tolerate.
coming back to the question of marriage, of divorce, is uniformity in marriage and divorce laws really that bad from a women's rights perspective?
In marriage and divorce?
Please allow me to complete. Now, the next panel is going to be discussing the idea of a diversity commission. There are members of the LGBTQIA community which are asking in the Supreme Court for a right to marry, the right to live in a civil partnership, which they don't have. Will uniformity not help the likes of these communities?
Uniformity per se will not help unless we, even in our secular laws, we have provisions which promote diversity and equality. For instance, in the Special Marriage Act, there is one single provision which is going against choice marriage, and that is that you have to give notice for 1 month before a marriage takes place. And that notice is sometimes pasted where everyone can see it, and the girl's family comes and objects to the marriage taking place, and so no marriage takes place. This has stopped hundreds of couples in our country from getting married, hundreds of young people. So it is not merely uniformity, again I will say, that we should hanker after or look after. Firstly, he's right, it's vague, we don't know what is meant by this uniform civil code, except that we get a feeling that Hindu laws are all right, but others are not. You see? And so it can be, and there's real danger of being just a majoritarian.
Asked for a draft bill on the subject. You've asked for wider consultation. As a lawmaker, what do you think is a potential policy solution to this problem that needs to be addressed in society? Are there existing legislations that can be amended and subsume some of these problems? What is an appropriate policy tool?
Well, I would be more than impressed by a lawyer who is able to come up with a draft uniform civil code given the diversity of India. And I do not think that the current government even remotely has that intellectual bandwidth. So therefore, that is why there will not be a draft on the UCC. Because I often ask myself, I come from a constituency where the Sikh faith was born, right? Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj consecrated the Khalsa on the 13th of April 1699 in Anandpur Sahib, the constituency I represent in Parliament. We have an Anand Marriage Act, which we have fought so hard for. It was amended to allow for registration of Anand marriages because our people going abroad, had a difficulty, the civil registration, which Kirti ji talked about. Now, if you are going to have a uniform civil code, what is going to happen to the Anand Marriage Act? They were not able to deal with the farm laws. The Prime Minister had to publicly apologize and take those farm laws back. Do they realize the repercussions of touching the Anand Marriage Act? So what are we talking about here? And that's why Habibullah Saab is absolutely right. Where is the draft? And I would really put my hat off to the lawyer who's able to come up with a draft of the Uniform Civil Code, which can encompass the entire diversity of India.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Gupta, would you like to say something?
Since Mr. Tiwari is throwing challenges to lawyers, I'd only like to say, and that is of course not the solution, it is possible to draft a uniform civil code. Having drafted it, the amount of insurmountable problems that will be thrown up will be difficult to resolve. That's perhaps the real difficulty. So there's nothing to prevent a uniform civil code from being drafted. We could perhaps copy the Goa model, we don't know. But if you copy the Goa model, then immediately questions like the one which Mr. Tiwari has raised will immediately arise, and then you won't be able to pass it. Or you would be hard-pressed to persuade people to do so. So it has to be, I think, addressed bit by bit, what is really necessary, what is not necessary, and that can be done without a uniform civil. From the fact that it is struck down by 2 of the learned judges, there is legislation. So this is the kind of solution that can be looked for. You have to do it bit by bit, and perhaps I didn't quite answer your very first question to me, that if there is a judicial disagreement on whether we should or should not have a UCC, I think the answer is that it is well settled that the judiciary cannot legislate. So if there is no consensus on the ground, then the fact that one judge thinks that there should be movement on UCC is really not something which can be taken forward anywhere beyond that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. I'm just going to open up the discussion to the audience. This gentleman has been pointing out that he has a question to me. Okay. I believe all your questions are said. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Ms. Nandi, please, can we get a mic?
So in the great tradition of India, I'm going to make a comment and not ask a question. But also, in the great tradition of lawyers, I think when Mr. Tiwari said that I challenge someone to draft a code, I think that's when I thought, oh, can one draft a code, right? Because of course, I agree with you that it's a dog whistle. And I think Ite Singh's points are extremely well taken, as are Mr. Habibullah's and Mr. Gupta's. Excellent moderation, by the way. I think that as constitutionalists, as people who believe in unity and diversity, sometimes the tendency is, and I do this as much as anyone else, to react to the dog whistling, which is important. It's very important. But at the same time, the fact is that the aspiration towards the UCC does exist in our constitution. So to that extent, given that we do have the Special Marriage Act, right? Perhaps one can collectively think about an opt-in, as it were. A UCC that exists as an alternative, that is not merely an imposition of Hindu law on everyone else, but even if it is, it means that other communities won't opt in. And thereby, incrementally, sort of taking forward that ideal.
Thank you. On that idea of Special Marriage Act, would you like to respond very briefly? I'm afraid that's all that we have time for. Mr.
No, that is what I in fact suggested, that it could be kept as an alternative, that you may follow your personal laws if you wish to, but I also urge at the same time, the personal laws also require reform. So whereas you keep the UCC, but then the UCC would also act as a kind of measuring tape for the personal laws. That basically the point is that personal laws, unfortunately I think this is common to all these personal laws, including the revised Hindu Marriages Act and so on, as mentioned by Ms. Singh. They all discriminate against women. So basically, the revision needs to be made in regard to the rights of women under all these laws. I mean, for example, the triple talaq has been spoken about. Triple talaq, even under Muslim personal law, is described as a bid'at, and bid'at means heresy. Yet, it is recognized as part of the law. It was recognized as part of the law. So, I mean, these kind of things, these kind of things needs to be cleared away. But at the same time, certainly, if the, and I said to start with, if the UCC, Uniform Civil Code, is given as an optional code, as a model code, which is there behind, and since you asked the question of how this can be done, my solution would be what a government solution always is. We appoint a commission, and the commission can then deliberate, consult with different interest groups, different community groups, and then come out. You know, for example, in the US Supreme Court, the images, they've given images of great lawmakers on the phrase as you enter the Supreme Court, including one of the Prophet Muhammad, because that is, the Islamic law is a component of US law. And therefore you can have, or the draw down on all these laws in actually dividing
Thank you.
the uniforms.
Thank you very much, Mr. Habibullah. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Closing comments from Mr. Tiwari, please. I believe you'd like to.
All I wanted to say was that I agree with what Ms. Nandi was saying, and I started off by saying that the Special Marriages Act, read with the Indian Succession Act, is a kind of a opt-in uniform civil code which is available. And so therefore, if anyone wants to go down that route, which I chose to go down personally, then, you have the freedom and flexibility to do that. The difficulty with the Uniform Civil Code discourse is that the Uniform Civil Code discourse has an underlying subtext which seems to suggest that it would be to the negation of all other personal laws, which is problematic.
But we must keep in mind who is making the Uniform Civil Code and who is going to pass the Uniform Civil Code, and not assume that it will be egalitarian, given the present setup.
Thank you very much, all the panelists, the moderator, for sharing your thoughts as we capture this group photograph for posterity. Thank you very much. A quick announcement for everyone that if anyone who's supposed to be receiving the Star of the Governance Award or Scotch Governance Award in Gold and Platinum category, then you'll be conferred the award in the other hall. The awards that will be conferred here in the Speakers Hall will be Scotch Governance Award in the Silver category. So after engaging panel discussion on Uniform Civil Code, we will have another panel discussion in just a bit. Thank you once again to all the panelists. But it's time to experience the rich heritage that India stands for, the soft power of India. So what we present now is a Nazrana for all the awardees. You've been seeing that since morning. These are a minute or 2 minutes of Kathak performances. So here's one that's titled Shakti.
शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो गंगाधर शंकर करुणाकरा माम भव सागर कारिका
da den den da den den da den den da ta ka tunga da ge ding ge da den da de ta ka da ta ka tunga ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka de ta ka ta ga di ge da 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 ta ka tunga da ge ding ge da den da de ta ka da ta ka tunga ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka de ta ka ta ga di ge da 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 ta ka tunga da ge ding ge da den da de ta ka da ta ka tunga ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka ta ke ta ka de ta ka ta ga di ge da ga di ge da ga di ge da ga di ge da ga di ge da
ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो ओ शंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो शिव शंभो स्वयंभो
Stay in the Glory of Lord Shiva by Abhimanyu Lal and Troupe. So thank you to both the dancers, Murthy and Sonali. Thank you very much, Yogesh Kangani ji on the tabla. And thank you to the entire accompanying artists as well. So we're all set for the second panel discussion here now, and that is titled Diversity Commission Equality for All. And after this panel discussion is the award ceremony where the Scotch Governance Award in the silver category will be given to 27 different institutions. So are we all ready for the second panel discussion? Let me invite the panelists now. First and foremost, I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Karuna Nandi, an advocate at the Supreme Court of India, an international lawyer. She also works with governments to contribute to constitutional, legal drafting and policy. Ms. Nandi has been listed by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2022-23, and her legal works include fighting for the rights of the Bhopal gas victims, contributing to the 2013 anti-rape laws, also the Right to Food Act. So a very warm welcome, Ms. Karuna. Our second panelist is Muskan Tibriwala, a non-binary lawyer who works on gender and sexual equality in law and its intersections with marginalized identities. They practice in the courts of Delhi. They have been part of the legal team representing petitioners in constitutional cases before the Supreme Court, such as the marriage equality cases and the criminalization of marital rape. They are currently Assistant Director, Law and Marginalization Clinic, Center for Justice, Law and Society, and work at the clinic focuses on the pro bono legal aid for trans justice. A very warm welcome. Our third panelist is Mr. Rajiv Chopra, Managing Director, Legal Accenture. And can we invite him on stage and also congratulate him, because this morning he's been conferred the SKOCH ILF Award for his contribution and service to law. Mr. Rajiv is an exceptional legal professional with over 2 decades of experience. And after successful private practice, he ventured into in-house roles in 2003, representing multinational corporations in various legal matters that range from advisory, litigation and arbitration, project finance, major infra projects, and foreign direct investments. A very warm welcome, Rajiv ji. And the fourth panelist is Mr. Mihir Srivastav. Please come up on stage, an author, artist. He's worked for nearly 2 decades with leading national dailies like The Helka, India Today, and Outlook, and cover a host of issues that range from politics, environment, wildlife, and investigations. He's got a couple of books to his credit, and lately he's been involved in making documentaries. He's a painter by hobby, because like writing, he believes art is also a medium that helps him to document people and the times. A very warm welcome. And please also welcome the moderator for the panel discussion, Dr. Gursharan Dhanjal, Vice Chairman with the SKOCH Group. So it's over to the moderator on the panel discussion, Diversity Commission, Equality for All. Thank you.
Thank you. A very interesting, a very sensitive, and a very touchy subject that we are dealing with. And I am handling an experience of more than 100 years across, put together my fellow panelists, 25 years versus 100 years. So I have an onerous task on hand. Talking of diversity, we've heard the previous panelists speak on the Uniform Civil Code, and the subject that we are going to be dealing with is no different in sequel, before or after, than the Uniform Civil Code, because it also pertains to equality in the society. Now, talking of India, we've been a very a tolerant society. We have also been a very colorful society. We have also been a very adjusting and accommodating society. The very first thing that comes to my mind is, I think, Karuna, you pointed out that I'm wearing very bright colors today. It did not occur to me that I'm wearing bright colors. I'm wearing my regular colors. But why is it that a bright color is associated only with women? Why is it that Mihir, who is dressed in multicolor, right from socks to his shirt, is associated only with women? And why men are to be wearing only blacks, men in black? Why not men in color? These are the questions which is what have been coming to our mind. Why is it that we do not have choice, a personal, and the other person I'm concerned about whether it is going to be acceptable to him or not, or her, or they? So as he, she, they, whatever circumstances that we have been going through, it needs to be fixed at a level where it is not only acceptable, it has to be corrected both in terms of constitution, it has to be corrected both in terms of a body that needs to be created wherein it is given a structure. So coming from that, if we are looking at Article 14 for that matter, it talks about equality. It doesn't go beyond sex, caste, color, creed, and sex. Talking of Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, but have we actually, because whatever was defined, that was 1947, prior to that, Constituent Assembly, all the debates, 1951, 52, thereafter, no discussion. Only recently that we have started talking about it. Therefore, it becomes an emergent issue in front of us that how is it moving forward? What should be the constitutional position? And that is something which is going to be acceptable. So, Karuna, I want to start with you that when it comes to constitution, what is it that needs to be done to fix it at that level?
Thank you for that eloquent introduction to this panel. The queer movement is one that has made advances at a rate that is much faster than a number of other movements. Decriminalization is something that happened way before anyone expected it to. And also, a hat tip here, tribute here to the judgment of Justice Shah and Justice Muralidhar, that was so robust that, and cited and didn't just cite, elaborated on the relevant constitutional provisions in a way that made it clear that discrimination was not an option and criminalization had to go. To the extent that when it came to the Supreme Court, the government took a step back, and it was Kaushal, a busybody, that then went to court and said, and brought a judgment that is, I think, a blot on constitutional law, in which it was said that because it's a minuscule minority, it is not something that needs to be done, which is, of course, contrary to any conception of a constitution which protects that single person against the might of the state. This, of course, was corrected then in Puttaswamy, in which not just Justice Chandrachud, also Justice Kaul and other judges said that this has no place, that Kaushal versus Naz has no place. And then it was removed. Now, I think that other movements should wisely take heed as to why these advances have happened and why they've happened so fast. It's interesting. What's interesting also is that the women's movements in India have always been very closely entwined with the queer movements and have supported each other. And now, I think today, the idea of the non-binary and the fact that it frees us from these boxes, the fact that we would not then have to think about ascribed characteristics, ascribed performances of gender, whether that be wearing black suits all the time, beautiful yellow, by the way, and or, on the other hand, performing gender as women, which is much more imposed and much more boxed in many different ways. In terms of constitutionality, we have come a long way. We're not where Article 14 was. It's not just articulation of equality before law. Article 15(3) also provides for enhanced protection and strict scrutiny on the basis of inter alia, or rather, amongst other things, sex. Now, can anyone tell me, my young lawyer friends included, how sex has been elaborated on by the Supreme Court? Does sex still mean sex? does sex still mean biological male-female characteristics? You can just raise your hand and use your booming lawyer voices or non-lawyer voices. Does anyone want to volunteer?
Let's have somebody from the audience. Any delegates? Anybody would like to say anything?
Even if it's a partial answer.
Yep. We are an open platform. We are ready to hear
Come
anything.
on, Rishika.
That sex under Article 15 would also include, as the Supreme Court has held in the Anuj Garg judgment, stereotypical understandings of sex. So not just the fact that someone is identifying as male or female, biological sex, but also stereotypical understandings of sex and how that is, like you said, boxing and forcing certain gender performances on people who are identifying as certain sexes.
Excellent point. Anuj Garg brings the strict scrutiny standard of Ruth Bader Ginsburg into our law. But in addition, the Nalsa judgment says that sex is not just restricted to a biological sex. It includes gender, but it also makes queerness then a protected category, right? And there are very clear affirmations of protections for queer people, trans people, including something that has become a sort of hot button point today. Of course, there's marriage equality, and I'm one of the council's leading arguments in that matter. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And Muskan has excellently assisted me in that matter, and also Ishan and Aman and now Rishika. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But there is work that has already been done. Nalsa is a fantastic judgment. It's really important. It includes, in constitutional terms, the ability of queer people and trans people to be recognized as socially and economically backward classes. Now, this is very significant, right? Because this means that it opens the door to horizontal reservations. Now, unlike horizontal rights, which is something that, is very easily confusing, horizontal reservations means that since you have, for example, you have Dalit or SC women, you have Dalit, you have ST men and queer people and women and disabled people, right? And in the general category, you have women, disabled people. There is the idea of cross-cutting identities, right? So we think it's been spoken of in terms of intersectionality, but you should not have to choose between being a disabled person and being a Dalit. Because you may not be a Dalit and you are still disabled and in the general category and say you're not then getting reservation, right? And it can't be a separate category in competition with the others. So therefore, what these movements are seeking is horizontal reservation versus vertical reservation. In this regard, there are a number of steps that have been taken forward. In Uttarakhand, for example, horizontal reservation for women has been recognized. This is essential. This is extremely important. Horizontal reservation for disabled persons has been recognized. Also extremely important. So now, why then, when 15(3) of the Constitution of India recognizes that gender is a category meriting heightened protection, would you then not grant, is there something going on there?
No, it's all right. Yep.
Would you not grant the same gender protections to people of a different gender? It makes no sense. When we speak of marriage equality, there was an interesting elaboration of different types of ways in which you can get married. I think Rohan Kochar had spoken of Parsi law and Baha'i law, etc. And that's one of the things that I had argued, that the common law, the life of the law is not just logic, it is experience. And the common law is a great vehicle to then recognize queer marriage and to take it forward on a case-by-case basis. The Special Marriage Act, in fact.
I'll interrupt you here. In fact,
Sure.
you brought in 3-4 very important points. I'll come back to you because my next question pertains to the same.
Certainly.
In
You
between,
know how lawyers are, we can go on forever.
and how judges are, which I am not. No, Rajiv, I will come to you third. So I move over to Muskan because that's another viewpoint which is going to come up. So put together, then I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions there. So Muskan, how do we work on the equality bit?
Hi. How do we work on equality? Equality is an inherent right. It's recognized as something that we all have by virtue of the Constitution. And there are several ways that all of us in our everyday lives work towards equality. As a child, you would want the same things that your brother or sister would get. So it starts from home, it starts from any authority figure, and there's also like larger ideas of equality in terms of government, in terms of policy, in terms of rights. So I think we all have a place in the fight for equality, and we're all doing it in small and large ways. As lawyers, our fight for equality is through policy making, through petitioning the court.
In your personal life, not as a lawyer.
In my personal life?
Is that something we can use anyone on the spot on, really?
In my personal life, equality has been, so I was assigned a woman at birth, and a large part of my personal journey through childhood has been to fight through these gender ramifications of what it means to be a woman. And I think we recognize that we're people with multiple identities. So our religious identity, our caste identities, our gender identities, whether it's man, woman, non-binary, trans, anything, all of that has certain social implications, and it means a different fight for every person. So the same way, I've had my fights, ma'am's had her fights, we've all had our fights. So for me, it's also been my trans identity and how that means that I would like to fight that through with society, with law, with legal recognition. So yeah, several aspects to it.
Now, Rajiv, let me come to you. Particularly during COVID, it so happened that the large multinationals, primarily housed in Gurgaon, they were told to let the women go by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And if they stay back beyond that, you have to provide office, to and fro, and all those kind of logistics and stuff like that. That did not actually result in good things for women. Women were laid off. So that is a discrimination at workplace. And now when we talk of LGBTQ community and queers and people like that, how do we maintain equality at workplace? How do we empower them? Do you have any such policies at your place which take care of it?
So thank you for the question. And I've now very quickly realized that on this panel between Karuna and Muskan, I have no match for the eloquence, nor the court craft, or whatever. I'm rustic because I did litigation only for 6 years. So I have to play this a little bit on the back foot in terms of firepower. But that said, to your first question, I know there are corporations and there are corporations, right? During COVID, speaking for my organization, and by the way, just to introduce the organization, because much of what I'm going to say is also relevant in the context of what I represent. So we are 320,000 men and women in India. It's a large workforce. And of course, our stated global priority is 50% women workforce by 2025. And as we sit in 2023, we have achieved 47%. Within the legal team, we are 450 strong lawyers doing multiple things in India, we are much, much over 50%. And then coming to your specific question before I come to what we do as an organization for diversity, inclusion, etc. We are always a virtual organization. Even before COVID, we used to go twice or thrice a week to the office. During COVID, we all went virtual. And we continue to be virtual. Now we sort of between ourselves just to sort of, have some FaceTime. We only go once in a week. So very few people out of 320,000, you could say maybe 10% people, given the nature of their job, they need to come every day to office. Otherwise, we're all virtual. So those things where, women were disadvantaged doesn't hold true for at least my organization, but I can relate to that. Because women, for us is a stated objective. So to get to 50% is a global priority, and we are a publicly traded firm. If we fail, it has an implication on our shareholders. So it's important for us. Now, coming to some of the diversity principles. Now, I'm kind of taking it that a large focus is LGBTQ+. But I just want to make a mention that for Accenture, LGBTQ is right up there, but amongst other things as well. So gender equality is one. Persons with disability is another, a side of LGBTQ. And ethnic and racial diversity in workplace is also very relevant and important for us, at least globally, if not as much in India. And we believe that the real power of diversity lies dormant without creating an environment, and where people are feeling integrated, feel that they belong, and feel open to expressing their uniquenesses. Now, and specifically to LGBT, I just want to tell you some of the practices and policies that we have. And I've lost much of my sharpness as well, so I have to rely on my notes. We have for LGBTQ, first of all, it's a very normal thing in Accenture. My boss, for instance, who sits out of UK, is a gay. And to me, it's really irrelevant. Many of our colleagues who we work with are gays. And at least from speaking for myself, and I know for people I work with, we don't even think about their sexual status. I mean, really, it's a nothing issue for us. But coming specifically to LGBTQ, we have provided progressive medical benefits, policies and programs. We offer training, networking support, and mentoring of LGBTQ folks. We have a strong ally group, 119,000 people globally, many of them Accenture leaders. In fact, majority of leaders are allies. And then we have successful internal campaigns to normalize the use of inclusive pronouns for LGBTQ colleagues. We have employee resources group and an allied network that creates a safe place for people to come out. And we have many people who have actually come out in the workplace, but they haven't come out in their personal space. So we have such an environment that people feel safe to say that within Accenture, but still hide it from their families. So we have those instances as well. And I just want to make some specific mentions about what we do or what we've done in the recent past to sort of make sure that our differential diversity is addressed. So we have equal opportunity policies for transgender persons. And it details out the commitment to creating an inclusive and safe place. We have what's called the Hues of Rainbow, which is an initiative which has powerful conversations on trans inclusion, parenting children who identify as LGBTQ, importance of mental wellness, and coming out stories within the Pride community. We have Pride mentoring programs. We have a very important training, which is L3, which is basically, it's about how to normalize the concept, right? And many of us attend that training, and it's an important one where not only our LGBT colleagues, but also many of us who are not from that community participate in that training to understand their thoughts and learn to appreciate each other. And in terms of specific, I just want to make a specific mention of some of the things we've done in terms of providing medical cover to our community, which is we were amongst the first companies in India to introduce medical cover for gender reassignment for our people. We modified our parental leave policies to focus on importance of caregiving and therefore, versus gender binaries to support LGBTQ. We have medical insurance programs to give our people the choice to personalize their medical insurance. Our people can choose who they mandate as beneficiaries, including their partners, even if they are LGBTQ. And we have now extended our medical insurance benefits to include facial reconstruction for transgender people.
So, if I may ask at this moment, this is an open question. You also quipped something in between that is part of the law, which is what perhaps they are following. Why is it loaded in favor? Why are you saying that we are doing it specifically for the community? Why are you doing it specifically for the LGBTQ? Is it an equal treatment or a preferential treatment? So I'll come to you later. You quipped in between. If it is actually part of the law, then why is it done that way? Before I move over to Mihir, a quick one from you.
It's not preferential treatment because the default is upper caste Hindu male. Let's be clear about that, right? So the fact that, and I must congratulate you, Rajiv, that of the not just the amazing number of things that you're doing, but also the way in which you express vulnerability, and the openness and the excitement to learn from each other, And so I think that's something to really recognize because the default is upper caste Hindu male, able-bodied, straight, right? Whether it is the media, whether it's NGOs, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's anywhere else. So diversity means actually representativeness. It means the absence of that quota, taking away that quota, because essentially it's that quota which has resulted in the overrepresentation of one group, which also must be represented, but not to this level. Right? And also just very quickly on the corporate, there's a lot that we can do, even without a law. Now, I know I have the privilege of anticipating the next question you're going to ask, so I won't address that now. But absent a law, a non requires a certain type of diversity. There's, of course, what Accenture's already doing. But we must also remember that the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act requires, under Section 19, workshops. It requires a committee to deal with any kind of complaint and discrimination, etc. It requires an entire structure, it requires a policy. So what have we done with, for example, Penguin Random House, that is one of our clients that we are working with on these issues? We have created an equality policy, not just an anti-sexual harassment policy, an equality policy that also then addresses not just LGBTQ, but LGBTQIA+. What is the IA? It's intersex, it's asexual. We must recognize that not all of us are inclined towards any kind of sexuality, right? And plus means that these discrete sort of categories leave out a lot of people whose experiences haven't been acknowledged, right? So once we did that in our workshops, it became clear that even through the door of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, there are progressive companies can do a lot. And the reason that I do these workshops is because there is a transformation that we all experience together, of listening to each other, of serving the bottom line. Because when you stop thinking about how to do this balancing act and navigate being a woman or a queer person and, in the variety of circumstances that we have, and being taken seriously or, performing, right? Because women have to be much better than the next guy, right? Also true of queer people, right? Then you're free to fly.
Good one there. So, in fact, it leaves two questions in my mind. What, Rajiv, perhaps you're doing is possibly your global best practices, which is what is being done everywhere. What, Karuna, you're talking about is part of the legal position to do with different aspects of life. But we are not looking at the elephant as such. We are looking at either the trunk or the tail. So what it actually requires is something which puts a structure around it. I have Mr. Habibullah with us, who was the chairman of the National Minorities Commission. And it also so happens that the commission did not come up in the 50s or the 60s, it happened in the 80s. And not that minorities did not exist in the country, they always existed. But thought and giving them a place of equality, their protection of their rights and so on and so forth happened much later. Probably time is now ripe. I mean, Human Rights Commission, several commissions happen to take care of a particular societal, social, or otherwise a problem or an issue. Time is ripe that we put all our thoughts and all our hats together in a structure, in a quasi-judicial, quasi-constitutional, or otherwise an empowered body, which possibly can be called a diversity commission, which looks into these issues of empowerment, looks into these issues of equality, and so on and so forth. So what, Mihir, to your mind, if we talk about that, a structure should be, what should a diversity commission should be doing, and why exactly do we need it? I mean, was it needed yesterday, or it's needed tomorrow, or needed today?
Not just, I have documented people from a very individual perspective, and I won't talk about law and all these things, but what I would want to concentrate on individual. I think given the technology, given the scope of experience, given, asexuality, as Karuna mentioned, could just be that we are not, we are attracted to some sort of instrument, an electrical instrument that satisfies us more than dealing with fellow individuals. So the point of the matter is that it's about the micro, the human. So the concentration has to be on human. It's not just about a certain identity group, but also infusion of technology, which I feel will determine how we live in future and how we deal with and what we get attracted to or influenced with or would want to see or experience. And I think when we look at the micro perspectives, then everything changes. And thankfully, because I have been documenting people, I also like the fact that we also can look at us as a microcosm, as inclusive of everything. And no one identity defines me, and nothing negates me either. I am everything in some measure and nothing in particular. And if we look at this aspect, I think the Constitution, now talking of law, should provide me with a setup where I can live my life full of contradictions, paradoxes. I may be something tomorrow, I may want to do something else, unless and until my freedom to exist in the way I feel like doesn't hamper somebody else's freedom. And which, of course, should allow that I'm very open to people having all kinds of viewpoint on various issues that I may or may not agree with me. But as long as I'm allowed to operate, and of course, freedom is not absolute. My freedom is sort of governed and by others' freedom to exist in the way they feel like. as long as it is within the larger ambit of humanity and constitutional law and law of the land, I'm okay with it. And of course, law of the land will also requires to be changed in light of how people are allowed to lead their life. And I think in this perspective, Diversity Commission can play a great role by creating various sort of ecosystem where people are allowed to exist in the way they feel like.
Great. Sir, I will now draw upon your experience, whatever is being talked about, as far as Diversity Commission is concerned, because a lot of thought has been given to that, and you're coming from.
What exactly would you, but the point that you made, the idea of a diversity commission, in fact, to replace the minorities commission, because I think the minorities commission tends to accentuate distinctions rather than overcome distinctions. As you probably know, that this commission was set up only in the 90s, and it has now been several years in operation, but it has not been successful in actually eliminating the idea of discrimination. In many cases, it has tended to accentuate that. So a diversity commission would be something that would certainly be better, but even the diversity commission will have to be careful to ensure that by nominating certain sections of the population as being diverse, then you tend to also accentuate their otherness. And in the previous session, of course, we were talking about the other. The idea, of course, is really to promote the idea that there is no other, so far as we as a nation or as a people are concerned. So would a separate commission be the answer, or as Karunaji had mentioned earlier, simply working maybe through little groups in each section of the government, of course, and in the private sector, working towards overcoming this idea? I was interested to hear Karunaji talking of a certain section of people as queer. I would have thought that the word queer is a somewhat derogatory connotation. But I mean, you can answer that after that, but the point that I want to make here is I don't think the answer really lies in setting up more and more commissions. But then where does the answer lie? One would look towards people like you to answer that question.
Well, thank you so much, sir. In fact, you have brought in focus another very important point, which is we, rather than he, she, and they. We, the people of India. So when we say we, then it itself means that we are talking of equality. And we are including all communities, X, Y, Z. And we are not discriminating against anyone. As long as we say that he belongs to this and she belongs to this, that means we are still discriminating and accepting that this is how it is. What is the merit in this argument? Mihir.
I'm glad you raised that point. That's basically what I'm hinting at. What I'm trying to say is that I should be allowed to lead my life, irrespective of what I call myself. And that in itself, which is, of course, a deconstruction theory says, well, if you don't want to be anything, you become something. But the point of the matter is that I don't want to be associated. I want a setup where I need not identify with something or an identity to be myself. So all the commissions that have been formed so far say, well, protect, because we all feel a certain kind of victimhood. So it is kind of a positive reinforcement which says, well, I have my freedom and I should be allowed to lead a life of a free individual without having to sort of adhere to a certain identity and or belong to something. I don't need to belong to something to be able to lead a life, which is to say that I sometimes am confused, because I don't know what I identify to. And sometimes because I've been dealing with individuals at a very intense level, I realize that I tend to identify with someone or the other. So I relive them in such huge measures, and which also indicates to the fact that I am that person. It's just how we experience life is what it shapes us. So my idea is that since environment shapes me, I should be allowed to shape the environment in a way that I don't sort of impinge upon others' freedom to do this. So the idea of diversity commission is that let's allow an eco space where people can exist the way they want to without essentially adhering to any sort of identity. And it's uniform. It's uniform in its values.
Yeah. Muskan.
So when you said we the people of India, right, which is from the constitution, but we're all aware that the Constituent Assembly was not diverse. There were merely 3 women of more than 200 people. It wasn't representative. It wasn't an elected body. There was no referendum when our constitution was adopted. It took the Nalsa judgment in 2014 to give legal recognition to transgender people. And what that means is that before that, the law didn't recognize that transgender people exist, like legally. That there are certain cultural communities in India, like the Hijras, like Kothis, like Kinars, and that these people are legal citizens who deserve full civil rights. So when we say we the people, when we say we don't want to other and isolate people, the point is that the existing structures work in a way, as ma'am was saying, that do isolate people. And therefore, in order to come to a place where there is equality, where there is these ideas of everyone can self-actualize to be who they want to be, to work in an environment where they don't feel inhibited or limited by their identities or their desires. In order to do that, there have to be affirmative steps. There has to be affirmative recognition. There has to be a minority commission that recognizes that certain groups of minorities go through limitations and prohibitions that other people just don't. As ma'am was saying, there is an explicit recognition of this in the Constitution with 15.3, which says special provisions need to be made for women and for children, which means that we are going to give additional benefits, additional laws to uplift certain communities, which is what brings us to an equality, because we don't start off from a default sense of equality. So having a minority commission, whether or not a diversity commission, and where it can situate in terms of the existing mechanisms that we have in government, is an important question to ask, because even with laws that we have, ma'am brought up the POSH Act, we have the Transgender Act, we have the Rights of Disabilities Act, we have special acts for special communities which establish bodies of their own. So the Rights of Disabilities Act has the state and central disability advisory councils. You have the Transgender Act, which is supposed to have a national transgender council, and the state and national welfare boards. And we're all aware that these welfare boards aren't formed in most states. They're underfunded, they're not able to work when our existing implementing mechanisms aren't working. We have so many bodies. We have the National Commission of Women, we have state commissions of women, we have the NHRC. We have bodies. The question is, and we're all aware that these bodies aren't working to do what their mandate is to what is possible. A lot of people are working, there's a lot of work being done, but so much is also not being done. So can the vision of this diversity commission, can its mandate be something that can make existing mechanisms work better? That's what I'd like to pose it.
Excellent. So just on the go, one minute each, you're handing over the baton to him. All right, Rajiv. Let's hear your views on Diversity Commission. What should it do? 1 minute, please.
So yeah, first of all, I agree with Meher and Muskan completely. So don't get me wrong, because what I'm going to say is on a tangent, wearing my corporate hat only, yeah? What I completely 100% endorse and agree with what they said. Now, my experience with some of these commissions has been as a corporate executive, that they're mostly put to misuse by people. So what happens is there's a women's commission, for instance. Now, there are women who have, concerns. They raise it with us. We go take them through either the POSH process or even otherwise our, misconduct process and so on and so forth. Investigation is done. These people keep escalating, and they just don't want to hear an answer which is not conducive. And then they knock at the door of Women Commission, which for us is an unnecessary loop to close them, right? Because the point I'm trying to make is that we as a multinational company have solid processes. We are going to do our best to to bring out the facts and take disciplinary action where needed. But sometimes people don't want to hear it, no. That's number one. Number two, again, speaking on a corporate lens, right? Take the example of, going a little oblique here, Maternity Benefits Act. Accenture introduced, and many others, we introduced 6 months, much before the law amended, much before. Now, the law came for 6 months. And now what the problem is that, for companies like Accenture, whether there is a diversity commission or not, we are going to stay ahead of the law. But then when you create choke points, then where people can still be deployed will stop deploying them because of the choke points you create by such commissions. That's all the point I'm trying to make.
Karuna?
Voluntariness is wonderful, but voluntariness has not brought us very far. Let's be clear about that. Voluntariness has not brought us very far in terms of gender equality, in terms of gender equality in its real sense, which includes queerness, or in terms of equality of religion, equality of caste. Law is an expression of justice. And justice cannot be dependent on the charity of the good-hearted. What does justice then mean? Justice means that we need a law that is a non-discrimination law. That it's not just that I can go to an internal committee if somebody touches me and says, hey baby, which is a crime under section 354, right? But if somebody yells at me and says, you're stupid because you're a woman, then there should be some mechanism that I can go through. And that mechanism, companies like Bertelsmann, companies like PRH, and I'm not just blowing the trumpet of my own clients, but also I'm sure, other companies like Accenture and others, right, are doing great work in this regard. But it cannot be voluntary. Because the largest proportion of our country works in the informal sector. A large proportion works within homes. So what do we need? What we need is a law. And it's not just going to be another law. It means that there will be a law that mandates non-discrimination. Actually, there was a private member's bill, and it's a very, very good bill that was tabled. And that was rejected a number of times. And let me give you an analogy. For those of you who are lawyers, tort law is very undeveloped in this country, right? So, therefore, if one person damages another, there is if I had time, I would go into the room, but we don't have time. There's a duty of care, there has to be breach of that duty, and there has to be damage, right? Like we all remember from law school, because we don't actually have that many tort cases that come up. What is an area in which tort law has flourished? The consumer courts. Because it's been codified, and there's a whole structure of courts that adjudicate these issues, right? In the Bhopal cases, we see a massive failure of tort law because of its lack of development. So what do we need here? We need a law, we need a structure of, not a commission. If you look at the NCW and the egregiousness with which it is acting today, and if you look at, anyway, we don't need another commission. What we need is rights, enforceable through remedies. We need courts, and the writ courts are already overburdened. We need a system of courts that are specialized, tribunals, I suppose, and with challenges before the high courts and the Supreme Court.
Great, thank you so much. So we actually have a diversity in the panel itself. two, going in for the Diversity Commission, and two, saying that it is not required. We need to otherwise fix and strengthen the parallel system. There is no need to go in for another commission, if I get it right.
Yeah. So I'll
concluding
just,
remarks.
I mean, my point of view, I don't know whether they're concluding. The point is that there is a Human Rights Commission. So whether it's minorities, whether it's SC, ST, ideally it should have taken care of because they're all under this one preview. As a matter of idea, I mean, I don't know whether it'll be effective or not, but here, for a change, we are looking at the person and not to the person's attribute. And I think that in itself, I mean, whether it's effective or not, but the very aspect that a commission which will have representation from all kinds of people who would believe in the micro, the individual, and allowing that individual to exist in the way that he wants or she wants to, in the way he wants or she wants to pan out, in the way he wants to work, to engage with the society at large, or not engage with the society, deal with technology, is a very good starting point as to somehow look at the macro picture from a micro perspective. Whether it leads to doing something or not is a matter of debate, but I think it is a good thing to start with.
Thank you. It's time to wind up the discussion, although it's getting very interesting by each minute that we are.
An objection to panelists won't serve beer.
Scotch for Scotch, please. All right. So, in fact, it's a good debate whether to go in for another commission or not. What will this serve? What should be the terms of reference? What should be the scope, and so on and so forth. In fact, brainstorming has actually started today. Maybe 20 days wind back, I wrote a discussion paper which has actually been published in the Festschrift, which was released in the morning, and that is available outside. Do read the paper, but to read the paper you have to shell out $600 perhaps, which is what they're charging for the book. Otherwise it's $795. You're getting at a special price. Do share your opinion with us, because by January, February time frame, we would like to come up with a Scotch position paper on the diversity debate that we have started today, and look forward to each and every one of you being a participant of that. Of course, you can agree or you can disagree. The choice is yours. So thank you, panelists, for being with us and participating with your open hearts. Thank you once again. So, let's come forward for a group photograph. I think let's come in.
Thank you. All the panel members.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So just to reiterate that outside we've got the book, if somebody wants to purchase that, at the intersection of law and life. We'll set up the stage for a small dance performance for a minute, and then we'll go to the awards. Thank you everyone for your patience. So what we present next is a bhajan, which is in the glory of Lord Krishna. So let's enjoy a piece of culture, and right after that, we'll have the award ceremony. Thank you very much.
Hey. ये तो ठीक है, गाने का कमाल है और तबले का कमाल है।
शरण गए को कौन उबार्यो 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 जब जब पीरे परिसंतन पर जब जब पीरे परिसंतन पर चक्र सुदर्शन तहाँ सवारो शरण गए को कौन सवारो ग्वालन हेतु धर्यो गोवर्धन ग्वालन हेतु धर्यो गोवर्धन प्रकट इंद्र को गर्भ प्रहार्यो शरण गए को कौन सव्यार्यो शरण गए को शरण गए को शरण गए को
Thank you very much to the artist for presenting such a lovely performance. And now we come to the Scotch Governance Awards, Silver. And I'd like to request Mr. Rohan Kocher, Director, SKOCH Group, to kindly come up on stage. Also, Dr. Gursharan Dhanjal, Vice Chair with SKOCH Group. So we have a total of 27 awards. As I call out the name, I request you to please come up on the stage. First and foremost, I'd like to invite Mr. Sudhir Rajpal, Additional Chief Secretary, Agriculture and Farmers Welfare Department, Government of Haryana. The project is called Revamping of Waterlogged and Saline Soils of Haryana. Yeah. And also another project, which is Mera Pani Mere Virasat under crop diversification. So congratulations, Mr. Sudhir Rajpal and team. As we give away the awards, I'm sure we can align our applause to recognize all the hard work that goes into creating the impact at the grassroots level. Thank you very much. We move on to the third of the 27 awards. I'd like to invite on stage Dr. Yograj Tamang, Director, Animal Resources Development Department, Government of West Bengal. Congratulations, Dr. Yograj. The project is called Development of Goat Clusters and Farmer Producer Companies. As he gets conferred with the silver honor. A round of applause, please. The fourth award, please welcome on stage Mr. Sunil Chavan, Commissioner, Department of Agriculture, Government of Maharashtra. Sunil ji, this is for the project Mahaved. Any other representative from this department? Okay, congratulations to you. The next award is for Department of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of West Bengal. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Uday Kumar Swaroop, Director, MSME, on stage, please. This is for the West Bengal Babishat Credit Card Scheme. Do we have any other representative? So we will pass on the honor. The sixth award is for District Administration Alipurdwar, which is a city in West Bengal. Can I invite on stage Mr. Purba Dorji, Deputy Collector. The project is called Jaldharani Dwars. SKOCH Governance Award Silver. Congratulations. Let's keep the round of applause going as it motivates everyone. The seventh award, I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Seema Patel, President, Balangir, Kalanhandi, Nuapada Milk Union, that's the BKN. Organization, District Administration, Balangir, Odisha. And the project is called Livelihood Through Dairy Development. Congratulations, Seema ji and team, as they get the silver honor. Next, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Mitra Bhanu Kacha, District Education Officer, and Dr. Manoj Kumar Sahu, Coordinator of Vijeta Project. This is the District Administration of Bargarh in Odisha. Congratulations. SKOCH Governance Award, Silver. Thank you very much. Let's keep our clapping going. It fills the energy in the room. Congratulations. And amidst a round of applause on behalf of District Administration Bhatinda, may I invite Ms. Lavjeet Kalsi, Additional Deputy Commissioner, to please come up on stage. Additional Deputy Commissioner, Rural Development, Ms. Lavjeet, alongside Mr. Manpreet Singh Arshi, Executive Engineer, Water Supply and Sanitation. The project is Har Ghar Jal. And due to this project, last 2 years, no incident of waterborne diseases have been reported. So a big round of applause. Thank you very much. May I now invite Mr. Mukuta Dekha, Deputy Chairman, and Mr. Devraj Kalita, Town Planner, representing the Guwahati Metropolitan Development Authority, to please come up on stage. Let's motivate the award winners with a round of applause. The project is called Mukhyamantri Sohoj Grih Nirman Ajoni. Ajoni is scheme, and of course this is the authority based out of Assam. Congratulations, Mr. Dekha and team, as we bring the SKOCH Governance Award Silver for the team. For the next honor, may I invite on stage Dr. Harshal E. Patil, Research Scientist, representing the Hill Millet Research Station, Navsari Agriculture University, Vagai, Gujarat. The project is called Hill Millet Vagai. Just few more awards. Let's keep increasing the energy of applause and motivate all the team members who have worked so hard to bring the impact at the grassroots. Congratulations. I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Jaya Vibhav Swami, Managing Director with Karnataka State Minerals Corporation Limited. The project, open cast mining of iron ore, magnesite, dunite, dolomite, and beneficiation of clay. Congratulations for the silver honor. Thank you very much. Can I request everyone to please put your hands together for Mr. Devendra Mupanad, Supervisor Customer Relations, representing Maha Mumbai Metro Operation Corporation Limited, that is MMOCL, and the project Mumbai Metro Lines 2A and 7 as they get conferred with the SKOCH Governance Award Silver. Congratulations. Amidst a round of applause, let's now welcome on stage Brigadier Retired Rajiv Kumar Singh, Managing Director with Northeastern Handicrafts and Handloom Development Corporation Limited. This project is called Northeast Handicrafts and Handlooms Development. Congratulations, Brigadier Retired Rajiv Kumar Singh and team members, as you receive the SKOCH Governance Award Silver. Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together now for Mr. Nandan Kumar Karar, Divisional Head, Odisha Industrial Infrastructure Development Corporation, that's the IDCO. The project is called Birsa Munda International Hockey Stadium, Rourkela, Odisha. Let's give them a huge round of applause. It always motivates the awardees to hear the sound of claps. Thank you. And amidst your applause, let me now invite on stage Mr. Kailash Chandra Sarangi. Thank you very much. As the music grows, let's also have the sound of clapping grow to welcome Mr. M.K. Sanabara, Senior Scientist E from Odisha Space Application Center. The project is called Odisha Forest Management System that has an integrated application to deal with forest fires, incident reporting, asset mapping, forest patrol and wildlife as well. Thank you very much. 6 more awards to go. The 22nd award, please welcome on stage Mr. Surendra Kumar Sahu, OFS SAG, Financial Advisor cum Additional Secretary with the Odisha State Agriculture Marketing Board. And the project is called National Agriculture Market, ENAM, as the project gets conferred SKOCH Governance Honor Silver. Uttarakhand. The project is called Skill Development of Self-Help Groups. As the project gets conferred SKOCH Governance Award Silver. Amidst all the energy within the room, let's welcome on stage Mr. Vinetosh Mishra, Director and Additional DG of Police. He represents the State Crime Records Bureau, Odisha, and the project is called Special Report Management System under CCTNS, which is called the Crime and Criminal Tracking Network and Systems, Odisha. Congratulations, Mr. Vinetosh and team members. So we now come to the last 3 awards. May I now invite on stage Ms. Deepthi Ranjan Patra, Joint Commissioner Technical, to please step forward, representing the State Transport Authority, Odisha, and the project is called E-Detection. Congratulations. Thank you very much, sir, for receiving the honor. I now request Dr. Binu Francis, Secretary with Thiruvananthapuram Municipal Corporation, to please come up on stage. Let's encourage them with a huge round of applause. The project is called Online Septage Management System. Congratulations, Dr. Binu and team, for the SKOCH Governance Award Silver. And the last award, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Sukanta Biswas and Mr. Shauvik Banerjee, Additional Chief Engineer, to please step forward. Mr. Sukanta Biswas is the Chief Engineer, ONM2, and the organization is West Bengal State Electricity Transmission Company Limited. The project is called WBSETCL, A Journey Towards Excellence. Okay, have anyone else representing that we have missed out taking names? Please come, the Maharashtrian team, please come. This is the project Mahaved. Mr. Sunil Chavan, Commissioner, Department of Agriculture, Government of Maharashtra. Can I request all the 27 awardees to please come up on stage so that we can have a group photograph? Bikaner team, please come. So we've got Dr. Lokesh Chaturvedi, State Program Manager, and Dr. Sushil Kumar, District Project Management. Okay, thank you very much. I'm calling out some names again. Yes. So I'm calling out this name again, Mr. Uday Kumar Swaroop, Director MSME. Do we have with us Mr. Swaroop? Any other representative from Department of MSME, Government of West Bengal? Project Pukar, do we have Dr. Lokesh Chaturvedi, Dr. Sushil Kumar? Please step up and come up on stage. This is the District Administration Bikaner, Rajasthan. As they get conferred the Scotch Governance Award Silver. May I invite on stage Mr. Nuswing Swain, Collector and District Magistrate, District Administration Board, Odisha. This is the Board Bunkar Bazar. Congratulations. Please put your hands together for Mr. Puneet Sharma, Joint Director, Economic and Statistics, Chief Planning Officer, Mission Kota. This is District Administration, Udaipur. Congratulations, Puneet ji. As Mission Kota gets conferred with Scotch Governance Award Silver. May I invite on stage Mr. Umesh Prasad Sarangi, NHM Deoghar, Odisha. District Headquarters Hospital, Deoghar, and the project is called Reduction of Home Delivery and Declining of Maternal Mortality Ratio. Let's give them a huge round of applause. That's the last recipient. Any other institution, any other representative who's here? We still have about 3 organizations whose representative can come. So congratulations to all the award winners. With that, we conclude this ceremony here. Let me invite everyone for lunch, which is right across here. Please enjoy your lunch, and on your way out, if you want to pick your copy of the book that was released this morning, you can do so at a special discounted rates. So congratulations once again. Thank you very much, Dr. Gulsharan and Mr. Rohan, for doing the honors. Thank you. The drinks are also being served outside at the lawns, and delicious food in the hall right opposite to where we currently are. So enjoy your lunch and drinks. Thank you, everyone.